Is it possible that California Governor anti-gun Gavin Newsom could be the next president of the United States very soon by appointment? Well, stay tuned. Hey folks, I'm Mark Smith, host of the Four Boxes Diner, proud American gun owner, constitutional attorney, and member of the United States Supreme Court Bar. If you haven't subscribed to the Four Boxes Diner, please do so and tune in for all sorts of great Second Amendment information. Okay, folks, I'm going to do something I don't usually do, which is going to speculate a little bit. I'm going to speculate. I'm looking down the chessboard a little bit, and I have a crazy idea that a couple people have flagged to me, some very smart people. And I'm not saying this is true or will happen. I'm saying it's an interesting thought experiment. And it goes like this. Right now, we know that President Joe Biden is extremely unpopular. That's just a fact. Even the Democrats and liberals think that's the case. We also know that Vice President Kamala Harris is equally unliked by many people, both Democrats and Republicans. I also want to remind everyone, of course, that Kamala Harris was so unpopular during the Democratic primary season that she dropped out in December of 2019. She dropped out of the Democratic primaries in December 2019 before a single primary or caucus had occurred. So she's not popular with Democrats and remains unpopular with Democrats as best as I can tell. So why am I telling you this? Well, it's interesting that anti-gun California Governor Gavin Newsom was in Washington, D.C. this week. So, here's what I'm thinking. It's a crazy idea, I know. But I want to throw it out there because I think one of the reasons why you tune into the Four Boxes Diner to sort of hear about and think about sort of deeper issues that touch on our gun rights than maybe some of the obvious headlines. Here's the deeper thinking that maybe had taken place. I could see it being occurring in sort of Democratic circles. It goes like this. Under the 25th Amendment of the United States, it provides for the replacement and succession of the president and vice president in various ways. You probably have heard about the 25th Amendment during the Trump administration because a bunch of liberals and Democrats were trying to invoke the 25th Amendment to say Donald Trump was not capable of being the president, which of course was really an absurd theory. But that's not what this is about today. There's another part of the 25th Amendment that I want to bring to your attention, which basically says that if the vice president, I repeat, if the vice president's office becomes vacant, then the president of the United States gets to pick someone to become the vice president. And that person does in fact become the vice president if the majority of both houses of Congress, that's the United States House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate, approve the person by a majority vote, by not supermajority, by majority. So hear out this possible theory. If you are the Democrats and you see a situation where Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are both incredibly unpopular, and good chance, as best as many people are saying, that Joe Biden, could not withstand a re-election bid and serve out his term. But you don't want Kamala Harris to be the next president of the United States because, again, she would be very unpopular, presumably, for a 2024 re-election bid. So what you could possibly do if you're the Democrats, and one wonders whether or not this is something to be discussed, is that number one is you find a nice golden home, if you will, worth a lot of money for Vice President Kamala Harris. I mean, nothing prevents Kamala Harris from taking a job somewhere else. She's not wed permanently to be the vice president. She could voluntarily resign. And for example, let us assume that some company offered her a huge sum of money to take a position in their company or to write a book or to do whatever. We know, for example, just to put this into some context of the kind of money that Democratic politicians are able to make, we know that the Obamas, when they left office, I believe they got a book deal together worth $60 million, according to reports. And that's just a book deal, not to mention all their other deals in Hollywood and beyond. I'm sure the Obamas are probably worth $1 billion today, or certainly very close to that, is my best guess. So why couldn't someone offer Vice President Kamala Harris a similar economic opportunity to quit being the vice president and go take a job in the private sector making a lot of money? And then if that were to occur, we know that the vice president spot would become open. Then what you could potentially do if you're the Democrats is you could appoint someone like Gavin Newsom to be the vice president of the United States below Joe Biden. Now, of course, what's interesting about this as a matter of law is the president, Joe Biden, could pick Gavin Newsom to be the vice president. He would still have to get through the U.S. Senate and the House by a majority vote. But I think there's a good argument that Kamala Harris could be the tiebreaker in the Senate. And of course, whoever Joe Biden picked for the House will get through in the majority, at least between now and next January, when it's likely the Republicans will at least take over the House of Representatives. No guarantees, but that's probably what's going to happen. So the way it works out is someone offers Kamala Harris a opportunity to make a lot of money and to step aside gracefully. She agrees to do so. Joe Biden decides to pick Gavin Newsom, the anti-gunner from California, as his new vice president. He's approved by the House and the Senate. Now Gavin Newsom's the vice president. Joe Biden is the president. And then what happens is, let's say 6 months or a year later, Joe Biden decides to resign. And guess what happens? Gavin Newsom, the anti-gun governor, who at that point, under my theory, would be, or under my scenario, would be the vice president, would move up and become the new president of the United States. Gavin Newsom could be the president of the United States without actually winning any kind of a national vote in any respect. Now, you say to me, Mark, this sounds kind of crazy, but the fact is this happened once before in the 1970s. For those of you old enough to remember, and I'm not old enough to remember this, but I do know my history books. What happened was you had Richard Nixon and Spiro Agnew ran as a ticket in 1968 and won. And of course, they won again in 1972. So in 1972, you have a President Richard Nixon and a Vice President Spiro Agnew. But I believe in 1973 is the year Spiro Agnew is indicted and basically charged with all sorts of crimes associated with things that he had done in politics in Baltimore before he was the vice president. So Spiro Agnew had to resign from the vice presidency. The new vice president that Richard Nixon selected was Gerald Ford. So Gerald Ford became the vice president, I believe, and I think that was also in 1973. And then guess what happens, of course? We know what happens is the Watergate controversy begins. Richard Nixon steps aside and resigns as the president. At that point, Gerald Ford, who had been appointed the vice president by Richard Nixon and approved by the House and the Senate, Gerald Ford became the president and then pardons Richard Nixon. So there is historical precedent for someone being appointed to become the vice president and then moving up to become the president, even though that person never went through a national election. Am I saying this is a certainty with respect to someone like a Gavin Newsom or some other anti-gun person that could step into the shoes of Kamala Harris, become the vice president, and then move up to become the president? I'm not saying any of this is guaranteed, but I am saying it's a scenario I suspect, at least that's what I've been hearing, could possibly be happening. It's speculation on my part. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I don't have great facts on this or anything like that. I'm not suggesting that at all, but I do want to put this out there for you in the community to begin to reflect on this possible scenario. Okay? I hope you learned something here interesting at the Four Boxes Diner. If you haven't subscribed, please do so, and we'll see you again soon here at the Four Boxes Diner.
Orders up. Table 2A.